Hi, it's Ileana, and today I'm going to talk about the types of remote viewing that I do. I do blind target remote viewings where I am given a combination of numbers and letters, usually like 8 sequence of 4 letters, 4 numbers, or just numbers and letters. It could be anything that the tasker creates. It could be random or it could be very specific in what they input into those letters and numbers for the target. I don't know what the target is. It is completely blind. I'm not told anything about it except that set of letters and numbers. And that's all I have to work with to go in remote view what's within that target and that signal, then create a report once the remote viewing is finished and send it back to the tasker or whoever, sent me the remote viewing target. Sometimes it's just people that want a remote viewing project done. Sometimes it's taskers. It really depends. And once that is complete, then that's finished. And sometimes when I do these blind remote viewings, then if I want to make that public, if I'm allowed to make the results of it public, what I need to do is put it in a slightly different report where it is kind of like asked as a question, like say, did such and such thing have this there, and something like that formed as a question. Sometimes taskers will allow me to put the remote viewing number into the public results. Sometimes they won't. So it depends on what I'm allowed to do with it and what I'm not. My reports will vary in whether the target number with the letters is there or not, depending what I'm allowed to do with the results to make it public. So I might just rephrase something, or I might just put a new title on it, whatever the tasker okays for me to do, or the person who, commissioned the remote viewing. So I have to follow a set of rules. And also to make sure I don't reveal anything that's private, and to be very respectful of the target and the information that I can put out in public of what the scope is of what I'm allowed to do with that. So that's blind remote viewing. That's assigned. Sometimes I also do open remote viewing where somebody might just send me something, ask a question, can you look into remote viewing this? Just a brief title of something that they want to be remote viewed. And I will do an open remote viewing where I will just use that keyword of what was sent to me, and I'll write down a question about the target. And then I'll look into the signal of the question, and information will come to me of what's in the target. Usually I know nothing about what's sent to me with requests. Either it's a blind target, even if it's an open target. I don't research these subjects. I don't look into them ahead of time. I'm not supposed to, and I don't do that. So I go by, okay, I have the set of numbers and letters, totally blind target. Go into that, what's in the signal, write down all the impressions, draw the information, or, type out what I'm getting of the information, and go create the images of what the stuff looks like. Sometimes it's hand-drawn, sometimes it's created digitally. It depends on what energy I get and how I want it represented. Same with the open remote viewings. I will either handwrite it out and then do a report, or I'll type it out. Sometimes I'll draw images by hand. Sometimes it will be purely digital. It depends. I'm trying to go with more typed out reports as I get information from the remote viewing, I will type it out in a report format as I visually see it in the signal and experience it and get the data. I will do digital images of the visual impressions that I'm getting and tie it in with the written type data. So I do reports in various styles, formats, depends on what I'm getting, how I'm interpreting it. So my style of remote viewing findings, how I present my remote viewing reports will vary. Sometimes I use different forms of putting down information on. Sometimes I use my own report style forms. It really depends on what I feel is the correct way to do it, and I do many different styles and forms with blind remote viewing targets and open remote viewing targets. So when I present the results on YouTube, for example, I just usually like to have a report with the subject of what the target was when everything is finished, whether it was a blind remote viewing or an open one. I just usually put the subject in there with a question and the report results. That's the easiest way for me to do it and organize it that I feel comfortable with. For the public stuff, when I present something, most times I have to keep the numbers of what the tasker gave me. Like, I have to keep it out of the videos. Sometimes I can include it. What's the easiest to do is to put the subject of the remote viewing after everything is done in a type of a question style, what I remote viewed and what the subject was when everything is finished, whether it was a blind one or an open one. I'm just explaining the process of my reports, how I publicly present things, and then I read out the whole remote viewing results, whether it was blind or open, and I present the report and the images, whether hand-drawn, handwritten, or typed, and digitally done for the images. The reports need to be clean. The reports need to be organized and concise so that they're easy to understand for the audience and the viewers, what the subject matter was, what the results of the remote viewing were, and to say at the beginning whether it was a blind remote viewing or an open session target. And sometimes after I finish the remote viewings and the reports, I might do some research on the subject matter that I now have information on directly from the remote viewing findings. And if there's any correlations from the research, if it adds up, I might add it into the report and also present that. And I always say what the research part is, what kind of knowledge that was, where I found it, because it might add additional evidence to back up the remote viewing. Sometimes I will do that in the report if it's valid to do so. So I wanted to explain this process and how I do the remote viewing and how I present it. Thank you so much.